I'm Julie Loving Scott. I'm from Albany, Georgia. My parents are Albert and Betty Loving, and yes, both my parents are still together after 53 years. I currently live in El Paso, Texas. We came here by way of the military. My husband retired here after 23 years of service. Our oldest son is currently serving in the military. His wife is a veteran, and they have our only grandson at the time. We also have three other sons that are in college. After being here for a while, I wasn't able to find another job, even at all of the call centers here. So I went into real estate. And believe it or not, it was after prayer and having a dream. And I have actually been in real estate as of today for 7 years. So I'm a licensed Texas realtor as well as a nationally certified financial coach. What does representation of the Black family as an African American means to me? Well, for me, I feel like we're being locked into something that doesn't fully represent us as a people. For instance, to be called African American only identifies one portion of my heritage. I always joke about how you can kind of look at the yellowish color of my skin and notice that I am not all African. So per my ancestry.com, I am Caucasian American, Asian American, and I know everybody wants to be, but in real life, I am also a descendant of American Indians. On my father's side, I am descendants of Choctaw Indians out of Mississippi. And my mother's side, they are Cherokee, Blackfoot, and there's a third one that was around in the region in Southwest Georgia. Me being from Albany, even growing up in a small Southwest Georgia town, I was always questioning, why is it I only can identify as a Black person, or now we are African American. I'm not for sure what 2021 is going to give us as a new name, but it only identifies one part of me. So that's why I tell most people I am American with African heritage, but I have other nationalities inside of me as well. And I also feel like there's a misrepresentation of us by saying we're African American, because the Black spectrum is so broad. You have people from India that are literally Black. They are much darker than me. Their skin is actually Black. My husband, who's West Indian, he gets offended when people categorize him as African American. He's an African descendant, but he's from the island of Jamaica. And if you look at his family, you see all of the cultures inside of his family, just like you do with my family. And then our very children, they call themselves Jamaican because they are Jamaican American. And think about it like this: when a farmer goes out and throws a cucumber seed in the ground, it doesn't matter whether he puts that cucumber seed in the ground in Africa or in America. That cucumber seed is going to produce only one thing, and that's a cucumber. So when we say we are African American and isolate all the other attributes and cultures that are inside of us, then I feel like we're not being true to the seed of who we are in America. In my opinion, an African American is that person that moves from Africa and they raise their right hand to become a citizen of America. I was born here. I am American. I am America because, like I said, I have nearly every nationality inside of me, just like my children. Because my children, when they fill out applications and census, they check other, because my oldest son, if you look at him, he looks like he's a mixture of African and Asian, and he's the lightest of us all, and he looks more Asian. our grandson, because his mother is of Hispanic descent, and we don't know yet. They're going to do their ancestry.com to see if she's even Asian. But if you look at my grandson, you can't tell that he's African American because his father looks Asian. His mother is Hispanic, but she has Asian features. So I feel, in my opinion, that we're misrepresenting ourselves by just saying we're African American. If you were born here in these United States, we should be listed, in my opinion, as just American, because we are America. Our history, if we look at American history, the first Africans that were here were not slaves. And on that note, the Africans that were bought here or brought here from Africa on the ships, they were not slaves. They were human beings that were enslaved by other human beings. And when we talk about slavery in America, it wasn't just Africans. If we look at the other nationalities, the Irish, from my understanding, even some of the Scottish, they were slaves first. So if we're going to tell the African American story, the story of those that came over from Africa, when you start getting to their descendants, you can't just, for the Black family, we're not just one thing. I even struggle with being identified as Black because when I hold the Black crayon next to my skin, we don't match. I have cousins that are Black. However, I am yellowish, orangish, brownish, depending on what sunlight hits me. So as African American, the representation is a misrepresentation. And I am an advocate for retyping ourselves. We've allowed other people to write our story, and it is his story. Now it should be our story and include every part of us that is represented in this America. Another concern I have when we say we're representing ourselves as African American, I think about when we go to other countries. My husband has served in the military in other countries, and I had the pleasure of accompanying him to Germany. When we went to Germany, they did not ask me if I was African American at the register when I spoke English. They asked me, are you American and do you only speak English? They were not concerned about the color of my skin. They were really concerned about the color of my money and my debit card. But I'm not identified in other countries as African American. And if we're going to be identified as African American, why is it that when we go to other countries, for instance, for the Olympics, or even at the Olympics in the United States, we don't have segregated teams? We don't have the African American team. We don't have the Caucasian American team, the Asian American team, the Puerto Rican American team. And we don't break it down like that. We say we are the American Olympic team. And I have a question that I've been pondering with since I was in first grade. Why is it that every other nationality that's represented in this country has to identify themselves by their heritage, but the Europeans have the luxury of deciding when they want to identify themselves as something other than Caucasian or American? I noticed during this last election, they would talk to the Americans and then the African Americans and the Latino Americans. So are we promoting unity even as a culture, as a country? Or are we perpetuating the segregation that continues to cripple us as a nation? So if we're going to have to be identified as African American, because that is the dominant culture for us, then I feel that everyone else should have to be identified by their origin. Are you British American? Are you Irish American? Are you Italian American? Are you Spanish American? But if we're going to be properly identified, like I've been saying, we should just be identified as Americans. And yes, celebrate what made us America, the African heritage, the European heritage, and let us never ever forget the American Indian. At the end of the day, their land was stolen from them. And we don't respect that culture like we should. So as African Americans, who most of us have Indian roots as well, let's identify ourselves properly. And it goes back to, it's time for us to retype the stereotype of the Black family.